Good evening and welcome to a special episode of the Eve Prosper Market Show. We're doing Fanfest review for anyone who missed the stream. I'm your host Lockfox and I've assembled a pretty decent panel tonight. First, why don't we start with Bhock from Capstable. How's it going, Bhock?
I'm doing great.
Next from Aideron Robotics, I have Random Boy 50. He's been helping the show with some server space and is hosting the current Hello World front page we've got up. How's it going, Random?
Hey, pretty good, man.
And last but not least, you may have recognized him from the trailer, Ashterothi.
Hey, guys.
So, before we get started, I want to get on to just a couple of very quick notes. I want to give a special shout out to CCP Guard for reaching out to the entire streaming community and counting me among them. That's a huge honor. And then I want to give a double shout out to CCP Mimic for sending me the slides from the presentations today. It's really going to make the show tonight pop. So no low def stuff tonight. It's all straight from CCP. So thanks again for that. So let's go ahead and just get started straight into the big news piece. We're going to start talking about CCP Fozzie's Sovereignty 5.0 talk. So before I start working down the bullet points, does anybody have any particular points they wanted to share at the start here?
No, one thing we can say is that the Sovereignty 5.0 is way better than the 4.0. It has a few items that can still be discussed and tweaked, but for once CCP has clear goals about what they want to do, and that's good that they tell us what they want to go. And there are small steps or big steps, but we have an end goal and we have a vision about what SOV should be and the type of SOV we should do. It's going to be exploited. It's going to have to be tweaked, but we're ready to tweak it. And that's a huge step forward.
Yeah, the other thing that I want to point out is that nullsec lifestyle is not, or sovereignty is not all there is to nullsec lifestyle. And it looks like there's a lot of other things coming to that region of space that's going to make this fairly valuable. And also, there's a lot of stuff that are still being held back in the sovereignty system. And I believe CCP Fozzie earlier said that there's certain information that is intentionally being held back so as to not basically be solved before it's actually live.
With all of this, I know one thing. I don't know about you guys. I'm insanely impressed with the steps that that CCP is taking with Eve. I'm really, really impressed with their outlook on it. And I definitely think that there's so much more up their sleeves in that way. Just with Null, but then all the other parts with the, deployables and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was actually really impressed that the tone Fozzie took with the show. Usually we see Fanfest reserved for some huge reveals and big applause, and then we all get to our metagaming during the stream kind of thing. And it seems like the tone in general has been more, well, we got the big announcement out, and we're going to do a little bit of tweaking. We really want to give you guys a more measured dosage of hype rather than the usual hype dump we get all around Fanfest. So
yeah.
the part actually that I thought was most interesting is that he put out a timeline of each version of SOV and why they're counting this as number 5, and how long we've really had Dominion SOV and how little we have iterated on it. And I thought that was a really interesting point to frame the whole thing around, and this promise of iteration. I believe it more this year than any other year.
It's clearly a main point that they know that the new system has to be able to evolve and to be tweaked in a very short time cycle. Because one thing that we learn with Dominion and pre-Dominion is that the players are going to exploit anything that is coming. And they're going to find a way to do things, and they're just going to abuse it and abuse it and abuse it. And if CCP does not change the rules or tweaks the rules to break that kind of abuse, then we're basically back to a kind of grinding, whatever it will be, of Apex Force or any other kind of blatant thinking that CCP did not have. Dominion people did not expect to have 50 Titan on a grid, one-shotting structures. It's just nobody expected. But that's how it's run now, because capitals and super capitals is the one stop for everything SOV related in Dominion SOV. So we'll see what they want to do, what is going to be the place of every type of gameplay, asymmetric warfare, capitals, subcapitals, fast-moving objects, roams, and they try to treat all types of gameplay, all types of size of structures, and not just get to a bigger alliance, a bigger blue donut that will do nothing.
Yeah, that was one of the things, and I don't know a whole lot about how coalitions work. I'm not even going to act like I do. But I do want to know, like, I'd be very curious to know how it works in Sovereignty 5.0 or that version of SOV that they're talking about, this capture and control type style. Because the way it lays out right now, it seems that when you're defending a system or attacking a system, you have to know who is going to be taking that system. So you have to plan it out. And with the Entosis links and all of that, and I'd be very curious to see how that gets handled. At least on the meta side of things.
Yeah, speaking of the Entosis link, the big piece I believe was that we've been looking for more information about, sort of the idea and the mechanic behind it, is that infrastructure across Null is really changing, and the real meat of it is that we're going away from HP grinds. The whole Apex force relies on more DPS is better, and bigger rock is best rock, and the deal we're seeing here is that they're completely changing the scale of warfare here, and if you're reading between the lines, you kind of see there isn't a space for super capitals, and there's not a great space for capitals either.
Yeah, that was the thing, right? He was like, we're going to fix them, and that was it. That was the last that was talked about, super capitals and Titans, and all that in that regards, is that we're going to fix it, and then that was it.
Well, so they've made the promise on 3 streams today that supers are on the rebalance block. Supers and capitals are on the rebalance block. And that has always been we'll get to it. And they have reiterated time and again that this is now a new high priority, and I'm glad to see it. I think we really need to bring back a good role for the high skill point drains of capitals and super capitals, but the roles really need to be around. Need to get away from DPS or raw damage in. As it stands today, and start talking about things like Titans, for instance, have a role without damage, right? They're portable jump gates at that point, and Rorquals, for instance, it's not used very often, but they can be mobile jump off points because you can put a whole fleet in a clone bay. I'm hoping that we see some more of that style of stuff come out, like we see portable station kind of mechanics come out of them.
And one of the things that is not often listed, and CCP has stated that they want to get away from post-shield bashing, which removes the last incentive to have capitals and super caps, because in the new SOV, if you don't also bash bosses to put you post and get the moon goo, and you don't have those shields and those huge HP and regen, they don't have an offensive utility.
Well, and so before we get going down the path of POS equipment, because that's a bullet point later in the show, I thought one of the interesting pieces of the infrastructure talk wasn't so much the rehashing of the Entosis link, but also the rebalance of the size of infrastructure utilities. So instead of needing a freighter to carry the TCUs and upgrades and all of that, they're going to be able to fit inside, he says, a deep space transport, except for the strategic upgrades, which you'd need a jump freighter for. And the other piece that was interesting is that we're moving the SOV upgrades from NPC created to player created, which I'm always a fan of. I always want to see players in charge of delivering the raw materials.
Yeah, it really feels like they're trying to lower the barrier to entry to trying to take Sov, if that makes sense. Like it's obvious that CCP's vision is that there's going to be a lot of little pockets of Sov in between the big blocks or whatever, or the ability to kind of carve your own niche and be a small player in the null scene. And so a lot of these kind of barriers to entry that require a lot of logistics on a coalition level in order to function have been kind of toned down a bit. And a small or a mid-sized corp or a good alliance could easily get their sights on something and just go and take it and see what they get out of it.
The last piece of Fozzie's talk got at one of the points Bhock has been saying for the last couple of days about the new Sov changes, being that the mechanics are great, but how are we supposed to make money in Null? And he threw out some pieces there. I'm always hesitant when we start talking about messing with the material and ISK fountains in nullsec, because nullsec people want to be completely self-sufficient, and then all the rest of us and the rest of the world still want to have that connection. No piece of space should be independent from each other. So I thought it was interesting. The big piece was reworking nullsec ores to be a new class of ores that will have their yields balanced against the sort of demand you would need naturally. So you'd get your 1,000,000 units of trit and 700,000 units of pyrite and 100,000 units of mexilon and 80,000 of isogen, whatever the general balance statistically is. You should be getting that from your nullsec ores. We're not seeing nullsec being a fountain of high value minerals.
They also said that it sounded like there's going to be a mixture of ore in any given belt, because they said that you could like pick and choose specific ores to figure out, to fill a surplus, or fill a deficit that you might have of a particular mineral.
And one of the important things when we say that nullsec has to be more self-sufficient, nullsec should never be self-sufficient. Nullsec, there's four races of nullsec. They don't have the same goo, they don't have the same items, they don't have the same type of force. You need trade, you need to force some trading between high-sec, low-sec, and nullsec. Part of a rebalancing of those new ores, if they are in anomalies, they will be isolated from rebalancing ores in low-sec. I still hope there will be some rebalancing in low-sec about either ore anomalies or minerals or ore types, because low-sec it's kind of blare in a lot of places, and they should get some plus, even if it's just a spread off rebalancing of industry in nullsec.
It's interesting you say that, because I've heard that complaint being brought to CCP quite a bit, and from my understanding, CCP's general reaction to that is to say that not all sections of space should be good for everything. Like they haven't actually indicated that they're unhappy that low-sec is bad for mining.
Yeah, and I'm along with that idea, is that we're not talking about gradients of space from worst to best, where we're saying, well, high-sec, you can do everything, but it sucks, and go down the gradient to nullsec, and everything is amazing, and it's land of milk and honey. The sort of balance spot I'm hoping we hit is that if you are an organization that holds a constellation because they really want to make the map matter, for instance, or centering around constellations, and your organization is holding your constellation, I am okay with saying that your peacetime supply be able to be self-sufficient to like 70 or 80%. That makes sense from sort of a, frontier lands, living by the work of your own hands and sweat off your brow kind of mentality. But once you start having to go to war, I want that to break down. There's no reason you should be building in your forward operating base. You don't build tanks in Afghanistan is sort of my terrible analogy I go back to.
No, you're absolutely correct. Like, nullsec, the idea is that it needs to, like, nullsec is its own empires, right? So it'd be, I personally feel that, especially like you said, during peacetime, there should be no reason why a nullsec empire that's vast enough and powerful enough, like some of the ones that we see, shouldn't be completely self-sufficient. I mean, even wormholers and end up being able to figure out that if they're coordinated enough and whatnot. So, but at wartime, then that extra pressure would require people to kind of go back to suckling on the teat of empire because they can't handle the workload. Like, that makes total sense, and it would also encourage people, forces to have an effective war chest, because their ability to restock is going to be different versus their ability to just create in-house. Like, that ratio changes.
Yeah, and the piece that I'm not hearing that I want to hear is that so Fozzie said a piece in his presentation about if you hold space, you should either be looking upwards up the chain to go get better space, you boot someone else out of their better space so you can sit on it, or someone should be nipping at your heels for yours. And
no, everyone should.
Well,
he said either you're gunning for the next group up, or you're at the best and everyone's gunning for you.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying, like, if you had A, B, C, and D, C wants to be up at B and D wants to be up at C, and I would like to see more than just the top dog fighting over their space. I want to see middle pieces of that continuum still be valuable for people, because I always come back to Aideron as a scale of corp that is at a weird plateau of, like, we can hit up higher above our weight class, and we have maybe 200 people at a time that we could throw at a problem if we really tried, but we're not going to have 1,000 Aideron people. It's not the growing the corp to that number just doesn't really work. And so where we could say, well, maybe we want a middle-low nullsec as a thing to put our flag on the map, we wouldn't ever be looking at Veil or at Ketch or at Delve or at Fountain, which are all, not Ketch, but they're all very, very valuable pieces of space, but we have no hope of really holding them. So I hope it goes both ways.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be places for each tier, and people kind of fighting up and down those brackets, I guess, is a way I would look at it.
So the piece I want to hear from CCP say as a phase 3 is that we start seeing some bits of the map become more dynamic, because there are so many static resources that you can say, well, man, I want to go to the west or I want to go to the south, and you look at who's in the west and the south and you go, well, balls, we're just a scrappy group of rugged individuals, whether that be Test or Brave or the Freeport Republic or all of those groups can't hold a candle to the industrial, logistical, military might of CFC or N3 or PL, and that best space really needs to be ground against for the biggest players.
But whatever they decide to do about sovereignty, and the big groups, the organized groups like the Goons, they are extremely organized, they are extremely strong in logistics and industry and leadership. They're going to be the winners of any soft system, whatever soft system, sovless, soft, occupancy, whatever. They're going to be the ones that know how to manage it and make it work and make it optimized. So they're going to be the top tier good dogs. They're going to be the ones fighting for those top tier region. But it requires those top tier regions to be way better than the rest, or at least some incentive, because you're not going to throw away Titans after Titan after Titan just for a 0.3% increase in your income.
Well, yeah, and so the hope on the map for me when it comes to CFC is that they will consolidate on the best space. They will rent out their mediocre space, and those rental empires in medium good space will be prime targets for harassment, and that you can start, thanks to the Phoebe changes, start talking about two-front wars, meaning that CFC has to pick, which regions do we actually want, rather than just saying the West, I want all of them, all of the moons belong to us, ha ha ha, laugh right to the bank. Instead they have to go, well, okay, so we can hold these three really easily, and we can get our friends to be buffers on the left and the right, but like if something goes down, like if we don't have a proper what's the word I'm looking for? A proper surf down in Fountain. We could have N3 up in our junk in no time at all, and have to defend the space we actually care about. So I'm just hoping it makes the map more dynamic.
I think the secret is that there needs to be able to be a winner of that really hard, that really high tier stuff, but have it be that winning the high tier stuff does not mean that you also by default have all of the previous tiers. Like, the problem is that right now the system has hit endgame where the winners have just won and there is no more contest over anything else. Like, Goonswarm can go and win that super awesome region, and then everybody else can fight over all of the rest of it. There needs to be a reason, or there needs to be some sort of mechanic or something in place that makes it so that winning doesn't mean total domination of the entire, everything.
And to get back to what Lox was talking about, there is still one big elephant in the room, which is the moon goo and the process. Because right now, SOV is worthless. People say, oh, SOV is good. No, SOV is worthless. You don't make money from SOV. You don't really make money from SOV. You make money from moon goo. Who controls the process and the moons control the money. You don't care who holds the SOV. It's 25% reduction in your fuel cost for the towers. It's not that much money on the big income moons. It's who controls those big income moons that controls the income, that controls basically whatever. And we don't care about the SOV. The SOV, it could be Grumpy Beer with a Tristan flying in those in that area. As long as they leave the bosses and the moon goo flowing and their income flowing to the big alliance doesn't care about the SOV.
So let's start with Seagull's stuff. She started the keynote and did a lot of the transitions. It really felt like she was doing a victory lap around the new release cadence.
I think she's really happy with it. I mean, it's been very, very successful, and now all the while I think she should be happy with it. It's created little mini hypes, whereas you would have 2 or 3 big hypes throughout the year. Now in every 6 weeks, there's a lot of hype around those things.
Yeah, we've still been really.
One of the things that I find very interesting about the last few keynotes is just watching CCP Seagull develop as a presenter. Right? So the first time she ever came out in front of us was 2 years ago, and she was there's this shakiness in her voice. She wasn't quite, comfortable being in front of the audience. This time, she came onto the stage and she was basically a rock star, and she knew it. And you're right. Like, the first 15 minutes of the show is basically like, hey, look, all of this awesome stuff that I said last year, this is what they've become, and this is what we've done, and it sets it up for what she's about to say, which is all of the awesome stuff that is about to happen. And this is really important, because in the past, a lot of these fan fests have been used to say a lot of things that were fantastic and never came to fruition. And so this FanFest has really been so far about manageable promises. And so to establish that the promises that are about to be made in the rest of the presentation, she really does clearly outline, see, look, this is what we've accomplished so far. This is how far we've come just since the last time we talked. And, she always goes back to those same charts and everything to basically show progress as you go along, to give credibility to the stuff that's going to come up.
And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier when I was saying that, I'm really excited about CCP's direction. I mean, they're showing that they're willing to do a lot to keep Eve being fresh and continuing. I mean, they completely killed off World of Darkness. They there were real people behind that kill off, and they were willing to do that to make sure that Eve continued on to the next decade. And I think that shows a lot, and it shows that they're changing fundamentally as a company. One thing that was said in the very beginning of FanFest was that, I think it was Helmer that was saying it, they're not going to promise these things that just won't ever happen. They don't want to do that anymore. And I think that contributed to Seagull's, victory lap, as it were, because it's, she promised it and it's happening.
Well, and on to that point, I mean, it's absolutely true that in years past we've seen so many vaporware presentations, like Eve on a tablet, on an NVIDIA thing. Like, they literally had some NVIDIA rep come and hack it onto a tablet so that Hilmar could get out and be like, look, isn't it cool? And then we never saw it again. And I know, Ash, this has been a particular thorn in your side. Two-factor authentication has been rolled out every year for like 4 or 5 years. And we finally got, we will have it on April 28th. So I thought that was amazing.
I teared up a bit, actually. I was so I've been banging on this drum for so long for two-factor authentication. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, I was very excited to see that. But yeah, that was actually one of the interesting things that I thought about the keynote, which was basically, once she established, hey, this is how awesome we've been. What she really did was, it almost seemed like she went back to all of the things that have ever been promised and told us which ones we were actually going to get, if that makes sense. Like, hey, you remember high-res textures? Yeah, we're going to get those. Remember ship skins? We're going to get those. And we're going to get, and you remember those two-form authentication tokens that we gave out all those years ago? Yeah, we were finally going to deal with those. Which means you can pretty much say goodbye to most of the things that haven't been addressed yet. So I'm pretty sure ring mining is probably dead in the water, for example.
Oh yeah, that was brought up in the
game
Q&A.
panel, wasn't it?
Yeah, they did a Q&A panel, which was an okay panel. They kept saying, "Wait for the keynote," which was unfortunate. But yeah, it's really great to see them. They spent like 70% of the show going through, this is what we said we'd do, and this is actually for reals. Put your hands on it, or put a date on the board, like tangible. And the only and that leads me up to like the structure thing, which we'll get to in just a little bit longer, where he put out basically revamped Grayscale's POS thing from 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm sitting here psyched because I'm like, if they can deliver on all the other things, this isn't just vaporware. They're actually going to do it. So just to get a couple of quick little things from Seagull's stuff out of the way, because I want to get on to Quant's juicy Graphborn. I found it interesting when she was talking about the NPE. I know this is a really small thing, but she was talking about how they rolled out these UI tools to 50% of new players. So they're really coming at a development strategy differently than they have previous. So I thought that was a really big change in the way CCP has been doing business, and I thought that was interesting.
I really liked it. Everything, no CC, nothing. Just all right, let's go. Let's do it live.
And I think it's tied into the beta notification system and a lot of the other infrastructure they've done over the last year, that we can do this sort of test-centric design and say, okay, well, let's roll up 3 UIs and let's roll it out to a completely random sample, and then let's go give CCP Quant the data, and he'll tell us, well, A is better than B, except C is better than A when it comes to this piece, so why don't we take that UI element, whatever the color tweak or whatever it is, and merge it back in. And so she was saying that they're expanding the view to the NPE, and I love this. I love that we're getting away from Aura just talking at you, and we're talking about like, oh, how do I do that? Which I think is a far more Eve thing, getting people into the mindset of Eve.
Yeah, it reminds me of that old chart of what to do in Eve, and there's like a flow chart that says, "Oh, I want to do PvP, and my PvP wants to scam people, is social, and it's like scam people, or corp theft, or it breaks down like all the different ways that you can make money in Eve and kind of creates it into a flow chart. And this kind of adds that sort of idea into the game, like. What's interesting is with the current new player experience is that it holds your hand throughout the whole process and kind of tells you what's important. And that isn't how people discover things. People discover things by looking at a collection of stuff and goes, ooh, that looks good, and goes after that. And so this really kind of brings out that explorer, that that kind of mindset that I think sets you up for success in Eve.
Moving on, let's death to EFT, right? They talked about this ghost fitting utility where you could run the fitter in-game, which is a target long overdue, in my opinion.
I know, when I saw it, I was at work when I was watching it, and I audibly was like, yes! When I saw it. It's a cool feature. I mean, it's been a feature that's needed, like you said, forever. But I tell you what, I don't think it's the death of EFT. I don't think it's the death of Pytha. Pytha, can't talk. It's a neat feature to have in client, but I can tell you, I've been many of times when I'm sitting there theory crafting a fit or something like that. Something just one-off application is so much easier to touch than have to log in, blah blah blah, to do all that.
Let's get something straight, okay? The ghost fitter is going to kill EFT in the same way that the in-game map killed Dotland, okay? Like
exactly.
Well, so I was thrilled about this because you have no idea how many times I'm sitting there in-game and I've got some simple task on my to-do list, like, oh, I have a storyline mission I need to run. Shoot, I don't have a ship handy. Let's just grab some stuff off the shelf, and oh, it doesn't frickin' fit, or I don't have this thing, and I don't want to be bothered to open up EFT to figure out, like, which missiles to put on a caracal because I'm lazy, and I'm thrilled for this. It's a great place to get newbies started in it because it's in client, and we can't expect a brand new player to really understand the entire tool set until they get into a corp. So as a way to lower the bar, to make it so people can get familiar and have a second alternative, I'm really glad. Next was, oh my god, so many ship fittings. This was the funniest part of the show for me was when Seagull came up and just started clicking, and there were just so many ship skins.
So many clicks.
Oh my god.
You know, I can't she's loving it too. Like, she's just sitting there like it was so awesome.
Well, if you looked at her, she had a smile on her face the whole time.
Oh, the goofiest grin. It was hilarious.
Yeah, it was 102 feet she went through kicking.
And so I'm hoping that to Amber is thrilled. I never know if he's happy about new skins or if he's upset because now he's not a special snowflake anymore.
So actually, I had an interesting question about that with the change of the skins, especially the ones where it's if you have the skin at all, or if it's if you have a ship with that skin at all, you just get the license when it comes in. Like I can only wonder what the market is doing involving the ship skin market, because the price of these skins didn't change.
You'll only have to wonder for a little bit longer. I do have the graphs for that.
Oh, awesome! See, that's why I come on this show.
I want to know. I want to know where my Hello Kitty skin though is. Like, I want
pink ships. I'm with you.
Well, they did say that like now that they're getting out of the corporation skins, which are all very, very pre-established, they're going to get to the designers in the Eve lore. Like the same people that are designing our clothes, basically, are going to come out with their own custom skins, and so at that point, anything goes, because
there better be punk tourist skins for everything.
Oh my god.
So I thought the UI was interesting. I liked the idea. She put up a video, which I couldn't link in the show, that showed that you could basically just switch them on a whim, and you'd be able to see your neighbors switching whenever you wanted to. So I'm a little sad to see the bling factor go away, because I did kind of like the idea of like, oh yeah, no, I use Tech 2 gold tissue to wipe my nose because I'm just so rich, when it came to some of those skins. Like I put the ore skin on the Rorqual that I borrowed from Blake for one of our ops, just to make it that much more expensive if it died.
So I just realized something. If you have a ship, right, that has a certain skin, then I'm trying to think, because like the day before this change goes into play, you're going to have people that have ships that basically are going to become licenses for these skins. And I wonder if there's going to be like some sort of trade or theft or something.
I wish. Unfortunately, Seagull was saying that this is basically soulbound, and once it's on your account, it's on your account.
Right. But the day before this patch hits,
that you go steal everyone else's.
Hangers.
That would be really mean.
Grab.
So, all of that's cool, but I want to get to my new hero dev, CCP Quant. He put on such a show. I was just like, every freak out GIF ever was going through my head with every click of the thing. He was doing that.
Now, I know that you have taken quite a bit of time to figure out whether or not you like CCP Quant. Like, since he's been announced almost, you've been kind of, you've been talking to him on Twitter and trying to figure him out and figure out whether or not he's going to do what you need him to do as a stat guy. So yeah, it's good to hear that you really liked that presentation.
I have such a man crush. Like, he was just smooth as caramel and had such great graphs, and he just owned it, and it was great, and every bit of it was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's doing this or that. So let's start walking through his graphs, because I have them, but I don't have the cool animations he did, unfortunately.
Yeah, I didn't know there could ever be showmanship when displaying graphs.
Yeah, so, like, by far one of my favorite presentations in like con history, and it's freaking graph porn. I don't even understand how he managed to pull it all off, but
yeah, it really puts the porn in graph porn here. So this was great because so a special place in my heart is for PvP statistics. Damage statistics really move the market, right? We don't have the market move because builders are building. We have it move because killers are killing. There will always be more builders than killers in general terms. And so it was interesting to see him walk through these graphs where he was saying, okay, well, let's talk about the first one, which is the Concord damage to players, which is about 3 million per day with spikes around Burn Jita. So this is pretty cool. 3 million damage a day is a lot when you think about it. Then he clicks onto the next one, and he's like, okay, well, let's talk about player versus player damage at 385 million a day with this huge spike due to B-R. Like, that, it turns the Concord damage into a straight line because of the scales. And it was great because when he's doing the show, like the scales all zoom out, and you go out to NPC damage per day, and the orange line is the structure damage per day, with huge spikes around the end of B-R, and I don't remember what this previous one was. 6 VDT? No, 6 VDT is back here.
That's a long time ago.
So the previous one was the grab on bosses.
Oh, right. It was
Pocos,
the Poco grab. You're right.
Yeah. He said it was a specific day, and it was the day that the Pocos became shootable by or takeable by NPC or by players in high sec.
And so the interesting piece about this scale is we just talked about player on player violence being on the scale of about 350 million HP per day, and we're talking about structure damage in the 4.5-5 billion per day range. Like, we're a whole new order of magnitude up when it comes to structure grinding.
Which actually makes sense in a lot of ways, because damage applied to structures are often theoretically maximized, whereas damage against players are very, very often under less than optimal conditions.
Well, yeah, but like when it comes to PvP hours, like the amount of player hours that go into a structure shoot that are actually applying damage, like amount of hours in a fleet applying damage, that if you go on a structure shoot, your most of your time is actually spent putting bullets into a structure, whereas a PvP roam, you might get 15 minutes of action for an hour worth of roaming, so it's hard to actually even get close to that number.
Sure, but yes, and my other point is that 2 frigate fleets of like 10 people can slam into each other and just completely wax each other, and that entire engagement does not create as much damage as 1 minute of a Talos shooting at an iHub.
And then the scales got even crazier when they started talking about player on NPC damage being another order of magnitude higher, or at least at 25 billion a day kind of damage, which really tells you, as much as we've talked about EVE being a PvP game, I have a hard time continuing to say that when you look at this map. Like, we're talking about, what, 3 orders of magnitude difference between PvE damage versus PvP damage.
And that's pretty normal, because whether you're in ISEC, you're running missions, or in NullSec, you're ratting, you're doing damage to NPCs. And you can do damage to NPCs all day long. Especially if you have a Thanatos that is using a Skynet.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to how much of your time can you actually be shooting at things. I get that between level 4s and incursions and sleepers and all of that. As much as I have been on a bend for the last year or so, saying like, no, we need to think about PvP as we need to think of EVE as a PvP game. This makes me rethink how much dev time we should be putting into meaningful NPC work, and it makes you wonder about the new focus on the Circadian Sleepers and the Drifters and the Jove being a way to serve this major demographic.
What I want to see, we have PvE, player versus environment. I want the reverse. I want environment versus player. I want the environment to actively attack us, and attack us with fury, or, ferocity.
You need to try some of the new exploration sites.
That's one thing I haven't done. That's something I'm not involved in, so I guess that's something. But
I mean, it's not like the most unmanageable thing in the world, but I've definitely been like, oh, I think I can handle this in my strat. Oh my god, and like had to get out as like a fog was just ripping apart my shields.
Right, but I want, like if I have a POS in a system that all of a sudden sleepers have shown up in, I want them to dread my POS. I want them to come down and siege it. I think that would be so interesting, because now not only do you have to worry about players, you have to worry about the AI as well.
Well, bear in mind, they did mention something which is kind of ominous, and they didn't make a big deal about it, which kind of is telling. But they pointed out that they are working on AI that they're not sure they know exactly what's going to happen once it gets injected into the game. And as much as that sounds weird, like, it kind of makes sense. You can build kind of its protocols and everything like that, but when it meets the actual New Eden with actual players that are actually interacting with it and the way the chances go, some pretty unusual things could happen. So it does really seem like they are working on creating a CCP-inspired honorable third party, as it were.
You make me psyched to think about CCP rolling out the first real artificial intelligence AI, like actually getting some cluster learning in there to adapt and change and act like its own organization, where the loss of one fleet somewhere in the cluster is communicated to a fleet elsewhere in the cluster, and the strategies change on the fly without human intervention.
No, and I was really awful about that Skynet, and I thought if we would solve it like that with NPCs that kill the fighters, and after they gone with the fighters, they walk to the boss and start shooting the Danny, which is inside the shield. Because, yeah, you aggressed us. Yeah, we're coming after you, dude. And we're going to bring reinforcements.
I can't wait for, like, in 2 weeks when suddenly some random corporation, like the Marmite Collection or Collective or something, it's like, what is it? The Jove Drifter faction has declared war on the Marmite Collection. And they just, like, start showing up all over the place because it just so happened that So this is what my fantasy is that there's triggers all throughout this whole thing. So people are doing these explorations, and by doing so, they're triggering these different, like, advancements in the AI. So at some point, somebody's going to do something, and it's going to piss off the Jove, and the Jove's going to scan them and see what corp they're in and declare war on them.
Station camped by NPCs.
That'd be so good.
I would love to see it. I'd love to see web spaceships finally get his Children of Light, and then perma-war decked by NPCs for figuring it out.
That is awesome.
It is. I want to see AI. I want to see rats outside of anomalies, outside of warpables. I want to see them roaming around. Like, I want to see a fleet of NPCs actually on a roam down in low sec.
Well, and they have. Okay, they don't go system to system yet, but, like, you aggress drifters and they find you, and they do clump up.
And actually, that brings up another interesting point, which is that it would actually be really nice if a lot of the ships that are not player controlled, like, were visible and possibly even interactable in space. Like, it'd be nice if we saw, dignitaries traveling in shuttles and NPC miners going out and hauling going around, and just having space be more busy. We should see Empire navies moving as they, move forces towards the war zone or whatever. I want to point out that all of this is super cool, and, like, as a lore guy, obviously on Hydrostatic and on the lore panels, we've been, this has been kind of our bread and butter, with discussing all of this Jove and, emergent threats and all that stuff. But, like, the fact that they tied it into SOV, like, they've actually justified the change in the SOV mechanics through this new threat, like, stroke of genius. It makes me very happy, because there's too many times in EVE where it's like, oh, it's a mechanical change, and guess what? The world now acts differently in some way, and there's no real attempt to justify why that is. But this really does justify why we're moving from the old SOV system to the new SOV system through a PvE kind of environment that change. I don't know. It just all works together very, very well.
I wanted those circadian sleepers to scan people and scan the AFK cloakers and decloak them. That was a good way to just piss off players and answer with a mechanic which affects everybody and does not much.
Well, we might still see that come out. I know they didn't make any motions about it, but you're not the only one who wants circadians to decloak cloakers. And if I were a betting man, I would say that it's on the roadmap. There's just some piece of weird ass cloaking code that is stopping that from happening.
Oh, I actually doubt that it's code that's stopping it from happening. I think that they're having fun with it and they're letting it happen pseudo-organically. And as they pointed out, they're not having to tell us anymore, right? Like, there are things being introduced to the game. There are mechanics being introduced to the game for the first time, really, since Wormholes, that we don't understand, and we don't know why they're there, and we just know what we've experienced with them. And I think that's a really cool thing.
I was gonna say, isn't it really refreshing to not know what's going on? You know, you look at missions. I can go to Eve Survival and know exactly what's going to happen, or all those different things. I wonder what this wormhole does. Oh, I can look on such and such website. We're making it up as we go, and I love it.
Yep, and the fact that they are playing into that and bringing in player comments or player events, like, what was it? Carrier got destroyed by one of the Jove ships on the first day, and so then they put out the scope video about them getting blown up. Like, I think it's really cool, and it makes it feel like this universe is real, which is it's the X factor that I think that we've been missing for a very long time.
Well, and that's been a design philosophy lately, over the last year or so, at least while Seagull's been at the helm, of we're designing game systems that are not inherently solvable. There might be areas of good solutions, and there should be more than one good solution, but we have designed it in such a way that it's not inherently obvious. We're going to have all of the sort of modern game design rhetoric about, like, imperfect balance, for instance, if you talk to the guys at League of Legends, or these sort of changes that, yes, there might be an advantage, right? But we're not going to talk about making all cruisers equal and solving the carrier problem by, like, tweaking down a bonus and turning up another stat. We're going to talk about, well, let's go give them a new role and put them in
comparables.
Yeah, we're going to put them in the battlefield as a waypoint for some new thing that, if you bring it, gives you these advantages. And it may not be in DPS, and it may not be in EHP, but it might be in an Entosis link speed up, or a defensive bonus for the system because you've networked together these ships to help harden the system, or some sort of, like, secondary mechanic that or it doesn't even have to be that complicated, where it's not inherently solvable. Like, we talk about the market. The whole reason I have a show for the market is that it's driven by players, and a lot of people think they know what they're doing, but most of them don't. And it's this completely player-driven miasma of people betting against each other and screwing with each other through the mechanics or through their own stuff, or the PvP is affecting the demand for something, and producers haven't caught up yet. Like, we should crave that kind of complexity in all of our game systems, like, in our missioning, in our PvP, in our industry. Like, that's what we should really want to see.
And one thing that is really important long term is I want the same AI to be applied to everywhere. Rework of the missions, rework of the empires, of the Concord. It's a need. If the game becomes unpredictable, that's when the game becomes fun.
Well, but we should still have qualities. Like, the only problem is when you try to go and take something that's as random as truly unpredictable. Like, if you really went and made a bleeding edge new AI that really did adapt and communicate with itself and learn from the players interacting with it, and grew. It managed to have its own income stream that they tracked internally, and it started to go down the path like a coalition, for instance. We can't have our Serpentis level 2 missions have that same brain in their head. They need to be less empowered, or they can still be random, and they can still have some of the hierarchy, but you need to somehow retard them.
Yeah, but they can be localized also, depending of what level, what grade. You can have an impact at the local grid level, at the system level, at the constellation level, at the empire level. It could be completely different.
We keep doing all these great discussions, and my slides are not in an order where we can go from discussion to discussion point. I need to do this better next time.
Make them up as you go.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just write them while we're talking. So to move on to the next point, because we spent a lot of time here, I wanted to hit on a couple more of Quant's visualizations. This one was one of my favorites because it's getting at a point that I personally have a problem with. It's a work problem, where he's talking about getting an entire slurry of data and then using it to sort of classify into these bins, so you can start categorizing things. So he put up a word map that he used to help make these, but he was breaking out like, well, let's talk about these sort of regions of players. So you have like professionals who are in every day and do everything and are super active, down to like entrepreneurs who just really want to build things and be in the market and don't really care about PvP. And he went through each of these groups, and I really want to go. I wish I was at Fanfest so I could stop him, pick his brain, and go, teach me your ways so that I can go and do things like this. I'm going to go ahead and link this later. The slides will all be handy. This one's straight out of the presentation. So I thought this was an interesting view. He also put up, I put these in the wrong order again, a view of how much people were producing, and it was kind of interesting. I would have thought that the US would have ranked higher on this list, but Germany and Japan make all of our stuff.
Yeah. So actually, going back real quick to the last chart, the buckets chart, I will say that that chart is probably my least favorite visually of all of the different charts, and I think what bothers me about it is the size comparisons. I don't know, maybe visually I just have difficulty figuring out the larges from the mediums as I go across.
You're not the only one on that.
Yeah,
so,
I agree the visualization isn't the best. I thought that the analysis itself was the piece I really wanted to get at.
Yeah, no, the analysis was really good, but given the fact that like everything else he did for the entire presentation was so visually stunning, I was kind of disrupted by this particular chart.
Actually, my least favorite is in a couple of slides. Is as much as I like the data, I hate the visualization for the years played versus number of alts.
Oh, don't hate on the hearts.
Oh, that chart was just hilarious.
No, I loved the visualization where he put the little axis on and said, here's Eve Uni and here's Brave and here's RVB on the thing, and then the linear line up through all of the coalitions up to NC and PL being best buds up there at the top.
I want to know who the outliers were. Oh, on the far right.
I want to know who this middle range with tons of alts. Maybe those are wormhole alliances.
Incursions as well.
Yeah, actually, I would think like people with mining fleets, like mining alts.
Well, I'd be curious to see if it still stands after the IS Boxer ban.
I also would like to know, like, I want to know what the scales of these axes are. Like, is all the way to the right mean average of 10 per member, or is it 30 per member? Because that's a little bit different.
Yeah, I don't know if he's
though.
actually going to. CCP is so mum about sharing account statistics. They hold those numbers so close to their chest, so it's going to be hard to get that info.
What would
They
be
should, though.
what would be fascinating is if any of these organizations were to do this metric on their own organization as best as they could theoretically give us a baseline that we could then extrapolate the rest of the graph against.
I bet CFC can do it, and I wouldn't be surprised if the bigwigs are asking their code monkeys to do it. PL will never, ever publish that number. They won't even write it down on their forums.
They probably won't even write it down next to their desk.
I mean, the PL guys have a lot of code talent that they keep very strictly in-house, where CFC is rather flamboyant about their internal operations, like GARPA and I forget the name of their logistics squad. They're very they want to tell everybody about it. Oh no, we're so awesome because we have these guys write up these things that make it so we can be awesome. Whereas Pandemic Legion, for instance, is like, oh yeah, no, we know all of our stats, but we make extra super sure that our APIs of our supers are not on Zkillboard, for instance.
Well, you talk about guys also that their forums are interlaced in identifier or unique identifiers to each forum member, so they can spot leaks.
Yeah, if you leak a screen, they can work it back to figure out who you are, which is just a level of cares that I find kind of hilarious in this game.
No, and it's a required level of paranoia. When the assets by character are so high, you don't want to lose one too, because it's going to be so damaging. If you get blue-balled one of your staging area that you don't want, or your temporary where you're jumping in the middle. That's what happened kind of in Deredic when they moved out in end of December. People followed them and killed a few of them. On the overall, they didn't lose that many, way less than they were expecting. But if they can reduce it by being secretive and being correct in their security, that's all the best for them. That's how they win the game, by reducing their losses and increasing the losses of others.
Well, I'm going to put you back on task again. So this one, I've been sitting on a secret for 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. CCP Fox4 put out a call for programmers, and this is the project they've been working on, which was to visualize all of your player stats. You can go through Authenticated Crest and figure out how many passes you've shot and how many reps you've received and how many how much ISK you traded in and all the sort of stats you ever wanted to go look up against. And I tried to participate, and work kicked me in the nuts, so I didn't get to actually make a thing. But I love the feeds, and Quant is talking about publishing, along with the feeds, some statistics about the feeds, so you can say, well, I've killed 900 people in 2015, and that puts me in the middle percentile actually puts you way up in the, like, one of the higher percentiles, like the 85th or something, for PvP activity. And I love me some data, and I wish there was better ways to get at all of it, but I'm so happy about these feeds. I just wish I could coagulate all of the data so I could look at all of my alts at the same time.
What I don't like is I found out a lot of people don't like me. I have a lot of red content.
Well, if you'd stop shooting people and laughing at them.
No, I've seen that. I have a lot of people that put them in their contacts with a big red cross, ready to shoot me as soon as they see me or as soon as I log in. That's wonderful.
I do want to point out one thing about this specific API endpoint, that it's it is still in progress, and CCP Fox 4 and CCP Quant are working hard to make sure it all is right and everything. But there's been a couple of bugs that have been found already. Like, for instance, I figured out that lasers were not, in fact, my top damage from last year, as I was part of the Glente faction warfare, but that drones are actually incorrectly being tracked as lasers for the purposes of the API, which...
Well, that makes sense.
Was hilarious when Marcel looked at his own chart. But also, if you do have any feedback for the actual tools or the API in the background, CCP Fox 4 has said to email him, or go to the dev fleet in Tweetfleet in order to get more information about that. But this is still definitely a work in progress, and I think I heard somewhere that this is still using Singularity data, and so it hasn't actually been moved live over to Tranquility yet.
Yeah, it's all Singularity. It's all still Singularity, and I would expect this to be on TQ data with Scylla, or however the heck we're supposed to pronounce that. They're working really hard to get this data out and stable and checked. I mean, watching the guys work on it to sort of do the first passes they've been doing, there's been really fast turnaround on feedback. So with all of the shiny graph porn out of the way, let's go talk about the CSM announcement.
Yay, my favorite part.
So did you make it?
No, I didn't get elected. No, it's
bum, 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 bum.
Well, it's I don't know. I am not terribly disappointed because I kind of went into it to experience the kind of the whole process, and if I got elected, then I would do the damnedest job that I could, and if I didn't, then I would just continue to do what I'm currently doing. And so it was kind of exciting, and I didn't get elected, and so I'm going to continue to do my other stuff, and already people are telling me to run for next year, so we'll see. But I will say that the people that did get elected, I am very, very happy to have lost to the people that got elected.
Yeah, this is a very good field for CSM 10.
I am totally pumped that Chance got elected, for example.
He made an extremely good campaign, and his thread on Reddit just before the election, that was a masterpiece of marketing.
Man, so good. He just ran his campaign so freaking well and was so charismatic. I was rooting for Bam Stroker instead for his spot, but that I can't wait to see the final information.
I've watched a lot of Chance's videos, and he was on my tickets because he was just he's a very good person to listen to, and you can tell he's very genuinely enjoying EVE. And I mean, he hasn't been playing for very long, and that's the greatest part.
Well, and that's the reason I didn't put him on my ticket, is that I'd prefer someone have at least 2 years of experience before they're on the CSM.
And see, that's actually something I thought about long and hard while I was writing up my my nominations, or whatever you want to call it, my endorsements. We get this idea about experience and all that stuff, but there's been a couple of events. I mean, the Battle of Asakai, BTEC-R, This Is EVE has brought in this gigantic slew of newer players, and these newer players, like it or not, they're staying in the game, and they're changing the universe to be like them, right? This is a game where you have impact in the world, and so these people are having impact on it, and they're creating a new culture of EVE than what we have seen before. So those of us who have seen, we're there for Monocle Gate, we're there for Dominion soft changes, or we're during all of those the highs and the lows, we tell our stories and we speak from experience, but we also speak with a certain amount of inertia because of the weight of our kind of vettedness. These newer people with energy and ideas and excitement and no preconceived notion of what EVE can or should be have really helped work with this new kind of development cycle, and has started to make Eve capable of things that I don't think we would have dreamed it being capable of 2 or 3 years ago. So if Eve is going to be this good because of these people's energy, then I want to join them.
Well, that's the thing, right? We're getting Eve seen through a different set of eyes and a fresh set of eyes. No longer are we getting pushed on by people that have played the game for a long time. They get kind of more jaded, a little more vetted. We're getting people that are like brand new, and I think having someone on there like Chance is going to be very helpful, because now we have someone, the new player, his voice is finally being heard.
Well, and of the green candidates, Chance was the one that I put my exception to say I would not mind him on the CSM. Just in general, when it comes to running, the best candidates have been ones who were preparing. So we saw Mike Azariah failed twice before he actually got on, and we saw Jane run last year, not make it, and make it this year. And I think that when it comes to who I vote for, I want to make sure that the people on my ticket are the feature experts, so that when CCP comes by with the first pass information, that these players represent the groups I'm voting for. So Chance made it past my post with as far as an acceptable candidate, because he was active in he knew his way around community, not just in Eve but in general, and knew about outreach and knew how to get people psyched and pumped, and he's wiser than his years when it comes to Eve, as far as that goes.
Another thing that's very interesting is that CSM has been really, in past years, a place for good, knowledgeable Eve players to go to die. And that sounds terrible, but it's very true. These people put in a ton of effort into becoming CSM, and they go and they work on the CSM, and then they never play Eve again, or they don't play Eve for a very long time, or they never play as actively as they once did. And so it'll be interesting to see how somebody with a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm responds to the weight of the crown, so to speak.
No, and one of the things that beta vets forget is that many of the old players are stuck in that mentality of 10 years ago. They don't really get interested in the current games, the new features, and pretty soon we're going to have a lot of competition on the board, and good competition, well-known competition, not crap games that are going to disappear immediately. Crowdsourced games that are drawing a lot of money and interest. So we need new blood, we need a new way of thinking, we need a new way of doing things. CCP has stepped up. The players have to step up. We stepped up with the new bros that finally we got into. They are not considered crap as they were considered before. And it's a global effort. Everybody has to work in the same direction, or otherwise in 5 years we don't have a game.
Furthermore, if the CSM is going to function as a focus group, which is, for better or worse, one of the kind of things that CSM does, then you want to have somebody with that perspective, because a very important segment of your player base is that new community that's kind of emerging, or that new kind of mentality that's emerging. And so, he may notice something that somebody else doesn't catch, or he may feel about something that other people don't get. And there are definitely some very good new bro kind of mentally people, like Mike Azariah is very pro new bro, Sugar Kyle's very pro new bro. I'm not saying that there isn't new bro advocates on the CSM, but to have somebody with that authentic perspective, as opposed to just trying to stay in touch with that perspective, will do them very well. But speaking of Sugar, I also want to say that I am super happy that she got a permanent seat. That she did a fantastic job in CSM9. I talked to her a few times as part of my CSM campaign, and man, I like her. I am so glad that she made it onto CSM10, and I'm very, very glad that she got as high marks as she did.
Can someone explain, just for the unaware at me, what exactly does permanent seat mean?
It means that CCP is going to pay to fly you to Iceland twice a year for the 2 summits.
Okay.
So
yeah, it used to be that the top 8 people or 7 people were flown out, and then the other people were quote unquote alternates. And then eventually they decided to try to get them all in there. So they try to get. There's a weird decision that gets re-decided how they do it occasionally, but basically between the CSM themselves and CCP, they decide who of the group will be flown to Iceland. But the 2 top voted people will get a default "you get to go" pass.
And so I actually thought it was interesting, after watching the campaigns, being as close to the action as I was this year, thanks to the Capstable guys, that managed to basically call the show before we got done. Now, I got Mike Azariah wrong. I had him as one of the close but not quite candidates. And then I completely counted out Sort Dragon because Sort Dragon. But I thought it was interesting, with as tight a race as we were seeing, as much of the back and forth that we were seeing for things like how many seats is PL going to get up front, and how many seats are actually up for grabs for new guys who don't have a block behind them, and all of these other things that really made CSM 10 an amazingly tight race between the 20 or so candidates who were in the running. It was interesting to see it land, to actually predict the landing as well as we managed to.
No, I was surprised that Manfred got the second permanent seat. I thought that Scion would get it.
I agree. When I did my predictions, I had Scion in top seat and Sugar as number 2, and Manfred landing that top seat was a bit of a surprise.
I will also say that I'm pretty disappointed that Bam also didn't get in.
Yeah, again, when it came down to my ticket, it was really a coin flip between Bam and Chance, and I liked Bam as a more rounded person for that, and hopefully, I mean, we'll see when the actual results get published, probably on Monday. It might be that, given another role, he might actually be in an alternate position. I think there's still a lot of there were like 20 really good candidates who were all running for like 5 actually available seats. So it's gonna be really close, I think, in that bracket. And there'll be the top 20, and then a huge gap, and then everybody else.
Well, it's going to be interesting because, like, they've officially made the policy that if somebody doesn't make it through the term, that they are going to get replaced by the next highest person. And there's also been a lot of talk about not handling BS on the CSM this term. Now, we'll see whether or not CCP Lilu can actually, like, hold that together and, like, basically say, hey, you're not contributing, get out, next person in line. But I think the next 3 people in line after these guys probably should still make sure their passport are up to date, or at least make sure that they pay attention to the news.
Yeah, now, to keep in mind, in the case of vacancy, it's not just who was the next in line by the counts. They re-roll those votes.
Right.
Through the system. So,
and briefly, just in case people don't understand how, or haven't been fully explained how this process works, basically, as people are eliminated either for not being too low of a threshold, i.e., was deemed to be no possibility of winning, or too high of a threshold and therefore cross the bar, their votes, the remaining of their votes, get cascaded down. That's why you choose people in order, right? So if your first pick, if your first pick gets eliminated because they didn't get enough votes, then your second pick gets eliminated because he got elected, or he passed threshold on the first round. Then your third pick is where your vote goes. Well, what ends up happening is that means when they re-roll it, they literally take somebody out of the equation. So it's as if you did not ever vote for that person. So if they were your third pick, then now your fourth pick is now your third pick, and so on and so forth, which actually can dramatically change the way the chips kind of fall as they do.
So the next section should be pretty quick, and then we'll get right on to the dessert. Torfifrans was, I think, the weakest part of the keynote. Basically, kind of being like the "look at our shiny stuff, please buy our stuff."
This is the part of the keynote that I just did not like, and I didn't like. It's not that I didn't like it because it was them marketing and selling something to me. My problem is that this, like everything in this FanFest keynote, was all about, this is the stuff that we said we were going to do last year. We did them. This is what we're going to do this year, and that's kind of the beat. And a lot of this stuff that we saw was the same kind of stuff that we saw last year, minus some things. Right? There was no talk about it. We didn't get the TV show. We got more information about models, but that was promised last time, and whatever. We still can't even get Goram t-shirts. It's like, yeah, okay, great. Like at this point, I really want them to have good merchandising. I want to throw money at CCP, but they need to stop talking. Yeah, they need to stop talking about it and just freaking do it, man. I bought 2 copies of the comic book, or the graphic novel. Well, I got the first one for free because it was on the app, and then I bought a physical copy just because I wanted a physical copy. Take my money, but stop telling me about these products and start letting me pre-order it, or give me it, or let me buy it, or whatever it is.
Yeah, the thing that's killing me is that as much as they talked about the new 3D models, they're not talking about, we licensed with some company that does those 3D prints a bunch, and we'll just say, you want a Macarial, whatever, send them money, we'll get our cut for the IP, and you can have your Macarial. And like, as cool as the offerings they put up, like, don't get me wrong, I do kind of want the QMX Megathron, and the one piece of slide I have in the presentation is the floating Nyx, which, oh my god, so nerd boner, but it kind of falls into that, like, okay, you did show us this already, and it's great that it's moving forward, and it's great that it's going to be like $500 stinking dollars, or at least, and so I'm not going to buy it, but like, when bonuses come around, I look and I say, well, how can I throw $100 at Eve? And I lack a lot of good answers to that.
I just want t-shirts, man. I ain't even gonna lie. Like, they need to go to one of the t-shirt manufacturers, because Lord knows there's infinite numbers of them online, and just license with them and let them pump out 50 different t-shirts and let me buy them all. Like, it bothers me that there's this mentality that everything that is Eve related as far as merchandise has to be super hoity-toity. Like, it's in a weird way $60 monocles again, in the sense that, like, where is the thing that I can spend $20 or $15 on to show my pride? Oh, a like, it goes patch, stylized vest that's like $100, and floating Nyx. Like, that is your tiers of purchasing, and it boggles my mind that there's not more granularity in what you can get from them.
And that's why the books are such a success, because they are priced right.
Right, exactly.
Well, and the merch stuff doesn't have to be hard. I mean, the QMX stuff, for instance, is cool, and they do so many cool prop replicas. And so, if you're a Firefly fan or a BSG fan, you can go get your stuff, and it really isn't that expensive. And oh my god, it tempts me all the time, and I have to stick to my desk ornament budget. But like, there was somebody on the live stream who had a 3D printed Wyvern. And there was another picture of it on Reddit a couple of days ago, and I'm like, why can't I just go and spend $80 or however much it's going to cost me in plastic and licensing, get this thing printed, paint it up for myself, because we're now in an age where this is a trivial operation. It isn't like 5 years ago where you're like, well, we have to go through a model maker and we have to have a minimum buy order and we have to make sure we can sell them. Like the old EVE battleships, of which I have 2. I mean, they're great, they're cool, and I have one of the ones to paint that I still haven't painted yet. But like, all of that was a huge investment, and it ended up being a huge loss for the company because they ended up liquidating them all. That's why I got a second one myself. And why can't we just go to some MakerBot company and be like, I give you money, and in 2 weeks, a spaceship arrives?
Or, I mean, Kickstarter it. Like, there's so many good options to turn licenses into things. And EVE... the brand of EVE is right now stronger than ever. They need to monetize that license. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird the decisions that they make on that side. Now, that being said, I will say that I was super happy to see Rix being, commended, I guess, by CCP, because Rix's artwork that he's been working on this last year was for sale as posters to people at FanFest. And I think that that's really cool that they're, working with community content creators in order to make products. But I feel like merchandising is where CCP has always struggled the most.
Well, it's a good way to make money. I don't know why they're not taking advantage of it.
But don't forget that they're going to make money through the skins. The skins are paid in Aurum. And it's a vanity item, and there's 130 of them.
Right, but okay, you can sell a skin for $2 of virtual currency, or you can sell a model of a Punisher that's Cador skinned that comes with the code that allows you to fly that same ship in the game, and you can sell that for $30. Like, this is not a difficult decision. Or it shouldn't be.
Yeah, but you don't want to milk too much the cow.
But my point is that you need to have options, right? So for the person that wants to pay $2 for a skin, well, for the person that doesn't want to spend any extra money, it's fine. For the person that wants a special ship skin, they can get a special ship skin. If they want, a little model, then they can get a little model. And if they want a floating Nyx, they can get a floating Nyx. Right now we have skin Nyx, nowhere in between.
Well, and so the point I keep coming back to is again with Ash, that the barrier to entry. So traditionally, when you're talking about merchandising, you had to put the money up front, and it was still a gamble. So you went and you bought your T-shirts, and you said, okay, well, did I get enough extra larges, and did I not get too many smalls? Because I forgot that my entire thing is Fat Space Nerds. And did I put this money in so that I have to sell all of it before I get my 10% back? Whereas now you go to people like We Love Fine and Jinx and all these other Threadless and all these other operations where you just say, we print on demand, we'll handle all the batching. Okay, you're not getting 10%, you're getting 5% or 1%, but you're moving 10 times more stuff. And it's basically thoughtless on your part. All you have to do is make sure that you sign the paperwork saying, oh yeah, this design is okay. And oh yeah, no, this thing is all right to do. And like, as long as the company you're partnering with doesn't go under, like the 3D printing models thing, just it's not even a problem anymore. You don't even have to talk about an upfront investment. You just have to get them on the printer, pay for the time, send it off, and ta-da, 3D model. Anyway, I want to get on to the dessert section here because we're going to run out of time if I don't put the lead out. Nullarbor is sort of my secret second love of a dev. He was pretty instrumental in doing the Creus industry expansion, and as much credit as we give Grayscale or Fox4 for their contribution, Nullarbor was right there with them, doing just as much work, even if he wasn't like at the front of the line for the credit. And he brought Grayscale's POS promise back, which just floored me.
Yeah, I definitely wrote an article a couple years ago for the Matani called POS's Revisions in Apocrypha, I think. I don't know. But it was in response to them saying, "Oh, we're not going to change POSes because it would be too hard. It'd be a whole expansion." And we've known that POSes are coming as a rebalance, but there's kind of been two different ways of fixing things coming out recently. There's been like, hey, we're going to change the UI, but functionally under the surface it's still the same, or all the way up to like, this is a whole new kind of ball game. And up until today, there wasn't really a firm understanding of where structures were going to come in on that. We knew that structures were very, very poorly coded, apparently, from back in the day. Almost, I've actually heard rumors that they were sabotaged by early programmers, but that could very likely be legend. But the bottom line is that it's always been this gigantic gorilla of a problem, and so they talked about what it was that was going to be, or like their end vision for all of this stuff, without a ton of actual like finer details, I noted.
Well, but that's fine in this case. The fact of the matter is they set themselves up to be able to make this promise without us rolling our eyes, which we would have done in previous years. If they had marched this out last year, I would have told you that, yeah, okay, that's great, you have a vision, but you know what, we've heard this vision before. The specific point that a lot of people are really losing their shit over is the promise that moons are no longer going to be the center of these anchorable utilities, and we're going to talk about an entire scale and breadth of anchorables that go from industry to defense to bases to billboards, even. If I walk
propaganda
through some of these.
stations.
Oh my god!
I want no, because it's great, right? Because this goes back to, again, what I wrote before, which is that when you're in somebody else's space, you should really feel like if I'm in VFK, I should feel like I'm in the heart of Rome. It shouldn't feel like every other system. And so the idea that there's going to be these these structures that are monuments or propaganda pieces or visuals, basically, as opposed to just functionals, kind of get me excited. I don't know. Maybe I've been playing too much of The Sims or something.
Well, no, and the big part is that they want to be able to place them anywhere. And that's a huge change in strategy and the way to play the games. You can make so many fancy things with that.
It'll be very interesting to find what things are going to be able to be planted anywhere and what aren't. There's some small considerations with that. Well, there's obviously some pretty large ones, but then there's other weird ones like, well, all of the shattered wormholes are designed specifically so that way you can't anchor anything there. But if you remove the anchoring restriction on moons, will you be able to anchor in shattered wormholes? And and if that's true, then what makes shattered wormholes different than normal wormholes? There's definitely some ramifications here, and this did feel still pretty speculative. But what I like nice about it was that they did specify that they want the first of these structures to be coming out by the end of the year. So they did kind of they said this is our grand design, but this scaled back thought is what we think is manageable within the year, which falls in line with the rest of kind of the presentation.
Well, and the piece that I was really blown back by, the part that makes me really buy into this vision, is that they really talked about the entire structure being a far more workable tree. They talked about like making it look like, going back to the ISIS charts for the ships, and saying, okay, well, what if we did that for structures, and we said, okay, well, if you want to do manufacturing, here's a tree of manufacturing, and if you want to do research, a tree for that, and a tree for offices, and a tree for propaganda, and a tree for each of these things, putting us really classifying everything, really thinking about where these belong in the grand scheme. And I was really blown back that they had the demos handy, they had this vision handy, that it didn't feel like just a flash in a pan and an empty promise like we've seen so many times before.
Incarna.
I believe there's something behind this door.
No, and one thing I really liked about it is that the fact that your deployable is used, it differs from a deployable which is not used. If you're building something, you can see that you're building something. If you're researching something, your researching element is lit and you see that something is happening. That's a great change in philosophy.
Yeah, there's definitely been a dramatic push towards making Eve immersive, as immersive as possible.
And I really love that they hit all of, like I said, they hit all of the points of things that just make me love Eve. They talked about the scales going way up, so you get out there and you have that sense of awe. That's really what got me into the game in the first place. That's what keeps me coming back to so many of these events, is you just look at it and you're like, my God, the scale just puts your jaw on the floor, and nobody does big like Eve does.
Yeah, well, I love the idea of 100 plus kilometer size stations. That just sounds epic.
Well, we have examples of that right now, which is the Jove stations, which are like
Right.
160 or something like that. So having that be ours, I think, is you're right. It's pretty freaking cool, and it's going to help for, especially if these structures are only the player built ones, right? What that's going to do is it's going to make your trip to nullsec for the first time, when you join your nullsec alliance and you get brought out there, that much more epic, right? Because you're going to see all of these, really impressive infrastructure. Like, just remember the first time you ever saw Titan, or you ever saw POS with its POS shields, or these little moments of amazement, and then there's just going to be that much more of that.
I always wished that for the new player experience, they licensed the Hitchhiker's Guide for when you open up the map for the first time to tell you that space is big. No, it's really big. No, you don't understand. You cannot wrap your head around exactly how big space is.
If you take humongous times by ridiculously huge, yeah.
Like that was the thing that hooked me when I started almost 10 years ago, was like, oh my God, look at the map. There's like so many systems on it, and I can actually visit every single one of them, and they each have their own thing going on, and there are places I could go to space and I'm not coming back from, and like the scale has always been the feature that keeps me here.
Yeah, I will say that when I'm showing Eve to a new person and I'm actually like in the client, the biggest thing I do is say, well, here I am. I just undocked from the station. And then I bring up like the system map and I go, so this is where the station is, and these are all the planets, and that's the sun. I can warp between them, and there's all this AU. Now, and then I hit the F11 map that flies out and be like, so every single dot on this bottom map is a solar system, and then every dot in this one is a constellation, and every dot, and then here's the universe, and then I open up the main map, and I've never not gotten a big, like gasp or whatever. The size of Eve, like the things that make Eve really cool are all there. They just sometimes don't get highlighted quite as well as they could.
Anyone else have any other poetic things to say about the new structures that are probably going to be amazing, and CCP can't possibly let us down with realistic expectations at this point?
I wonder how them operating in tandem are going to necessarily go. Like, it'll be interesting to see both mechanics in place. It'll also be interesting to see as people as time goes on and people have not converted from the old POS system to the new POS system, like, is that going to make them stronger targets of opportunity because they're seen as like lazy or something? I don't even know. It's interesting because it'll be the first time that I can think of in EVE history where there are two effectively competing mechanics working in tandem.
Well, and I think that CCP has set themselves up to phase out POS by making them functionally obsolete. We've seen over the last year or so, not even year, couple of years, that POS have not been a central standing point of the community. Like with Krios, for instance, they brought forward the industry stuff, but made it so that the number of towers needed in space was 1/10 what the space assets required to do industry was reduced by 1/10, and the real estate opened was nearly doubled because of the changes that came in Krios. And the need for towers is going less and less as we move towards this new SOV mechanic. We're not talking about structure grinds anymore. We're not talking about Apex Force N+1 HP grinds anymore, because we don't need them. We don't need them to conquer space. We don't need them to take a station. You still need a POS to sort of stage at to be your spearhead, but again, we're talking about a major reduction in the number of towers needed. The only thing left that absolutely is central to POS's continuing to work is moon products, and I think we're going to see a 1-2 punch there that says, okay, well, you can still have your POS there, and we're not going to take anything down, but your moon miner isn't going to work anymore because we've changed the way moon products work, or we've brought in this new harvesting utility, and you've made the whole operation obsolete so that people want to give up their POSs, that the sticks go away because they're no longer useful.
It's interesting to keep track of economically what happens to these things, because POSs are not only these, our homes that, a lot of people live out of and operate out of and do industry out of, but they're also monetary assets, right? These things are not cheap. There's a lot of ISK tied into these things. And now that the writing is on the wall for them, every day they become slightly less valuable. It'll be interesting to see how they function economically as we move forward. Like, there will be a point where you may even see a minerals glut because everyone reprocesses their towers because they're no longer worth anything.
Well, and when it comes to retiring, I think CCP has shown that they're willing to do that they're willing to be right by players and pay fair market value when they go and do these conversions.
Okay, well then you have a new problem. Because in the past, somebody, if they've taken out an item from the game, like they took out, what was it? It was decryptors. No, it wasn't decryptors.
No, it's the data links or whatever they are.
Yeah, whatever. It was something from in the industrial change that made it so that it was the blueprints that you had to do in order to create the stuff.
The encryptors.
Yes. Okay, so Yeah, so you got paid for any encryptors or encryptor blueprints that you had because they just vanished from the game. But that's my personal asset. They gave me the ISK. So what's going to happen is, because these POSs are not individual assets, they're corporation assets. So that money is going to get dumped into wallets. So again, day one of whenever that change happens is going to be the best day to be a corp thief. That's all I'm going to say.
No, but I still think that bosses will have a role, perhaps degraded, and they clearly stated that bosses will be able to be anchored outside the moons, so they will have some utility.
The new ones will.
They said bosses, they didn't say new bosses, and they could replace all the old bosses with new bosses.
But they did specifically say that they are this new structure system that they came out with, which is what the entire presentation was a new system that was going to be rolled out in tandem with the current POS system. That they're not even going to try to make the POS system into the new POS system. They're just coming out with this new thing, and eventually POSs are just going to be used less. Like the old ones are going to stop being used because they're not the new ones.
Yeah, but you could migrate them with a transformation per job or whatever.
Yeah, you could say that like Caldari towers are now the base thing to do research utilities on, and then cash them out that way, and then you cash out the labs, and probably have to do something with the asset grab. But I mean, the technicalities of it are really small potatoes compared to moving forward the vision. And frankly, I'm more than willing to say that we go put an extra 2 or 3% ISK into the stream and say, you know what, this is what it's going to cost. We're just going to eat that cost. We've done the analysis to know that, okay, well, that much extra ISK is probably going to wreak havoc on Plex for 6 months, but in the end, we need to have a 10-year vision, because that's really where we're heading with this kind of thing, is how do we keep Eve running and how do we keep it fed so that we get to another 10 years, that it continues to be the best choice in space games when things like Star Citizen and Elite Dangerous and this genre is coming back into vogue. But
in any case, I'd be happy to see a change in the way that the goo and all that income is spread out. I'm for a taxation of use of a space and activity in the space coming from the player back to the corporation and alliance, and not simply who owns the goo as the money, and perhaps we'll trickle it down to you, paying back through the SRP, so you can have fun.
So before it gets much later, let's move on to we can talk more about POS stuff. I'm hoping that there should be a structure panel either tomorrow or the day after, so there should be more stuff to talk about tomorrow. But what I want to talk about before we close for the night is I promised our own graph porn, and I'm going to deliver. Thanks to Random Boy, we have basically an up to every other hour look through Eve Central at the markets, so we can do before and after analysis with each of the keynotes. So starting with Plex, we're seeing that I've been predicting for months now that we'd be going up during FanFest. We're not as high as I would have hoped, but activity remains high. As long as the hype train keeps going, I think we're going to be in an upward swing. I'll talk more about Plex in the normal show next week. The big interesting one, after going all the way back to the Fozzie-Sov presentation, the price of high-end minerals, megasite and zydrine, specifically brought out during his presentation, spiked spectacularly right after Fozzie was done. Like, as he said the words megasite and zydrine, I think people were out buying up every scrap of it they could get their hands on.
Yeah, so if you check in JITA, Megasite, usually you have 7 to 22 million units sold on a given day. And just after, it was 126 million. Basically, we had 6 times the biggest day. And everybody bought everything till up to 850, which is 14% higher than the beginning of the day. That's a huge fire buy on Megasite. And Zydrine, that's the same problem. It's 3 times more than the best days, and it went up 26%.
Well, these two minerals in particular were hit really hard by the rebalances, right? Because he was even talking about that, where because more mining was happening in nullsec, it just flooded the market with these minerals.
Well, no. So the vision is the problem. So the spectrum. If you think about ores by rarity, so we go from tritanium at the bottom to megasite at the top. Those were also skewed by securities. So you could only get trit and pyrite in the highest security, and as you went to lower and lower security, you started getting more and more of the high ends to sort of improve the ISK per hour. So mining in nullsec and wormholes was netting you a lot of Zydrine, Megasite, Noxium, those sort of high ends. And what happened is that the amount supplied by this gold rush, as it were, made the price of these high ends trivial. So even though you had tons and tons and tons of it, you'd sit there and mine all day in nullsec, and you'd say, okay, well, pre-Creus, I'd mine all day, and I'd have all of the Megasite and Zydrine in the world. I'd have to go back to Jita, sell it all off, buy the tritanium I just can't get, compress it, and then ship it back out if I wanted to do any work in nullsec. And Creus fixed some of that, where now you could, in the highest end ores, get a good share of tritanium out of them. So you fixed your low end piece, but then you still had this bottleneck around Mexilon. And this changed to, quote, nullsec ores. And the way Fozzie phrased it made me think he's really talking about getting away from Arcanor and Bissote and really getting into, we're making new items and they're going to be balanced a certain way. And we're going to talk about sane numbers of material coming out of each of them, and you'll be able to get what you need. This really changes the picture, and it brings the expected value of those high ends back to being luxury prices. Now, the final fallout from that, sorry to keep rambling, is that they still don't account for a lot of the value of mini items. You still talk about your capitals, for instance, are still mostly gated in value by tritanium and pyrite. So it's not going to ripple that hard through everything, but it's really going to change the amount of ISK per hour coming out of nullsec if these minerals stay high until June, when the change actually arrives.
But it could also be some speculation about CCP rebalancing again the content of the ores, and you can expect that within a few days we'll know if it's a rebalancing of existing ores, and in that case people are going to store them because they will be more valuable in June. And if they store, that means you're going to have a chokehold on that Zydrine and Megasite, and people need to stock it before it goes up again. You're just playing the market and expecting a market to move, and perhaps it's simply a speculation.
So I want to side with you, because the sane person in me says, well, none of this is actually constricted until the SOV changes hit and we actually see the reality of it hit the ground. But we've seen historically that, especially like the Odyssey change, when they announced, well, you know what, we're finally taking the nerf bat to technetium and we're doing a 1-2 punch, and technetium is no longer a bottleneck. Even though technetium could still be constrained for another 3 months between when they announced and when they patched, we saw the new normal take over. And if this survives the weekend, if we see this spike of like Zydrine stay up in the 650s up to 700, if we see Megasites stay above 1300 through the weekend, I'm willing to go hang my hat on saying that's a new normal and make hay while the sun shines. Now, when it comes to your point about rebalancing ores, I would hope that we talk about new ores, so we're not trying to play some meta compression game that we have to balance two ways because you've said, oh, well, okay, Arcanor is now going to have this mix, and so now let me go look at my stockpiles. Let's not move any Arcanor and just mine it as much as we can get our hands on it, compress it, sit it in a station, and live like kings in 3 months. I'd rather see, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to get any of them, and I'll still be able to reprocess Arcanor for whatever it's worth. So why don't I keep the same normal? I'll stockpile the raw materials, or I'll deal with the compression traditionally, and then when the change hits, I'll adjust to the new normal with the new ores. I really want to see new ores rather than recycled ones.
They did specifically say, Fozzie specifically said that the nullsec ore is going to be a new ore. He said we're adding a new ore to nullsec.
Then it's good news.
Everyone's happy.
I did like I think it was in the Aideron Slack. Somebody recommended that the new ore be just referred to as unobtainium.
I think that's trademarked by Mr. Cameron. So let's move on to PI. So when Fozzie announced his changes originally, I was really worried about high-end PI because it seemed like without the structure grinds, without the real consumption, without the SBUs to consume the high-end PI, that we were going to see a big crash out in a supply stream that I think is a decent level of a decent high-level play for people who are interested in industry, love it or hate it. And during the presentation, we didn't see any particular movements on any of the items outside of what we were already seeing. We've been seeing that rolling spike I talk about on the show every other week or so. I'm hoping that we start that either people start getting smart. This might be a good place to speculate in because it's a second order effect and people are usually slower to pick up on the second order stuff than the blatantly obvious CCP Fozzie said, let's go buy those. I'm going to be watching these for the next few weeks, but I thought it was an interesting point to bring up. Moving on to interceptors, I was actually hoping to see a big spike down with people selling off, with Fozzie being rather adamant about troll scepters are not going to be a thing. I will personally make sure that troll scepters are not a viable mechanic. We didn't see that. We saw some normal fall off in like the malediction. But the Raptor is still sky high. The Crusader is still pretty high. We'll look at these again tomorrow and see if maybe they moved. I still think that interceptors are going to... There's going to be a few people selling off a lot of stock thinking, oh, I was foolish. But it might take actually seeing the Entosis module fitting requirements to make that happen.
I think that interceptors have gained such a powerful niche in EVE at this point that even without the Entosis links, they're still, fairly usable. So it's not like interceptors are going to be significantly nerfed or anything like that. Like I don't know if the change was enough to create a dramatic market flux.
And I don't think so. The Travel Scepter is so good.
Yeah, like the Troll Scepter with the with the link was not ever like a primary use for the interceptor, I don't think, in comparison to some of the other things it can do.
Well, my point is that I sort of expected it to do the spikes we saw around recons when they were announced to be rebalanced, that we saw this huge spike in the curse, And then if you look back on it now, if you had bought a curse at the peak, you look really stupid. The entire heat came out of that, and we're back at the normal spot before the rebalance. So I sort of expected that the Fozzie announcement was going to peak it. You're going to see like a 10 or 15% rise in prices because people are going to be like, oh man, I'm going to have me so many scepters, and I'm going to go take VFK, and none of you guys can stop me. And then this announcement come out and go, well, I better get out while the getting's good. It was sort of the thing I was expecting to see, but we're not seeing that.
I think that there's a dramatic difference between, like, for instance, the Interceptor buff, where it was like, oh yeah, by the way, Interceptors now have this super unique power, and they're also really good at dogfighting, and they're rebalanced, and so they're useful, and so we see this giant spike in the price. Same with, like, their recons and all that stuff. Whereas the Troll Scepter was a novelty approach, and therefore the fact that they lost a novelty kind of thing, I don't know. I wouldn't have bought a stockpile over a novelty, and I wouldn't have sold my stockpile in the event that novelty didn't work out. But then again, I think back to the the freighter rigs, and that fun
the best market troll of history.
Yeah, so I guess anything's possible.
Moving on to the next thing that was touched on was with the ship skins being announced as permanent. If you own one, then it will be in your thing when the change arrives, whenever that is. Again, this is another spot I expected to see a lot of spikes in, where people were like, oh man, I gotta go buy some, or I gotta buy a bunch, and then I gotta sell them to all the suckers on Monday. And we're seeing some of those spikes. We're seeing in about half of the items, we're seeing a spike all line up at the same time. So like the Incursus Inner Zone, and the Merlin Werkomi, and the Nephentar Rifter. But we're not seeing things like the Police Pursuit Comet isn't moving anywhere, because I guess everybody already has one, and the Khador Punisher isn't moving. So I was expecting to see more of these, like the Merlin graphs we're seeing, but they're not showing up.
The problem with this is that the supply and demand is backwards, right? So right now, if I want to fly 10 Police Pursuit Comets, I need 10 Police Pursuit Comets. In the future world, if I want to have a Police Pursuit Comet so that I can have 10 once this new system comes out, I only need one. Which means if I had 9 others, there's a good chance that I might just sell off those 9 because they're not needed. They're going to have zero value to me after this change is released. So I actually want less of each of these ships. I want to have one, but the people that are interested in these skins, they already have the means to get it. Like, they probably already have these ships, or they could just buy one and call it good, or they could just still buy it with Aurum. Aurum gives it a natural floor to what it can go. But the problem is that having more than one has suddenly lost a ton of value to people.
That's actually a pretty good point. I do expect in the short term to see a bit of a land grab to get your one. So a lot of people asking for their one, or maybe one for each of their accounts kind of thing. Or even each of one of their characters, so you'd have to spread them out. But without a release date until we actually see a release date announced, I think we're going to see the prices high, and as soon as the announcement is put in, we should see an exponential decay down back to parity with the unskinned variant by the time the change hits.
My other guess is that not all variants are going to be created equal. The ones that can be got in the Aurum store are going to probably suffer the most from this decay. The Police Pursuit Comet is gotten through Concord LP, so it is technically a limited resource, but with the amount of incursion runners that are just able to pump out stuff, not so much. But the rarer ones, like the Blood Raiders, or the ones from the Mortal Legion sites and stuff like that, and some of the special edition skins and stuff like that, suddenly those became a lot more valuable. So it'd be interesting.
And then I also pulled cruisers, but we're not seeing a lot of the interest on the cruisers. The Caracal showed the same sort of demand spike that we saw before, and same with the Thorax Aliastra edition, excuse me. Showed some spikes, but the rest of it is staying pretty flat, and there's no significant action in the cruisers, which I think is a little more interesting because I actually like a lot of the cruiser skins. They're a particular favorite, but I know I don't get to undock them as much as I'd like.
I'm actually going to have to duck out now.
Yeah, that's fine. We should probably be wrapping up the show anyway. I want to say thanks to all of the guests. We'll be doing this again tomorrow night. It might just be me tomorrow night at the rate I've heard from potential guests, but we'll see. I'll keep it posted. Are there any final closing thoughts any of you guys want to go do before I let you go?
Oh my god, I was in the trailer.
Now, we really need to see the presentation on Saturdays about the new deployables and the new structures. That's the big change that is going to happen. We need clues about what's happening.
Right. Depending on how that goes, I might have a lot to say. We'll see.
Just as a closer, thanks again for tuning in to the Prosper Market Show. If you want to get in touch with the show, all you have to remember is Eve Prosper. That'll get you to the YouTube, the Twitter, the Twitch, the blog. To write to the show, it's at prospermarketshow@gmail.com. I want to say thanks to our guests. You can get in touch with Bhock at... I really should edit this in correctly. At
Bhock Collective.
Bhock Collective. Thank you so much. On Twitter, and he's on the Capstable show. Random Boy, do you have a Twitter?
Oh God, no.
Okay, well then forget Random Boy. And then you can get Ashterothi at Ashterothi, and he's on Hydrostatic as well. So we'll be back again tomorrow at 0100, same bat time, same bat channel. Thanks again for tuning in.